All right, welcome now, day 14, reading through 1st and 2nd Kings. Today's reading is chapter number 5 and 6. Where we left off, Elisha had picked up the mantle. There were several narratives there in sequence. Elisha was doing a lot of things to help out people, mostly common kind of people, and it was the first real signal of virtue that we've encountered. Elijah showed power, but Elisha was showing benevolence. So the narrative continues now, and benevolence continues. And here is the story of Naaman. This is a story that I've been mentioning in Luke chapter 4 in Jesus' sermon in Nazareth, where he likens his ministry to that of Elijah and Elisha. And this is one of the specific occasions that Jesus will refer to. Here is this Naaman. Naaman is the commander of Syria's army. Okay, so Israel and Judah, both each of the divided kingdoms, are at odds with Syria. And, as we have found through our readings beginning in 1 Samuel, when you're at odds with someone, you're at continual odds with someone. This isn't meant to be expressed lightly, but very seriously. When we look at Middle Eastern culture today and how there's ongoing feuds that go on, not just in the area of Palestine and Israel, but also in the areas of, remember, in Iraq, where Saddam Hussein had gassed the Kurds and all of that. They were occupying the same broader land, but yet different people with separate identities where there was long-standing feuds. These kinds of in that culture, the reason why that we see those things today is because there's a lot of deep-rooted oral tradition that goes back an extremely long time. We don't quite get that in our culture because here in the United States, well, just our land, as far as when we look at the most of the population is European in origin, and that has been a phenomenon just for it was late 15th century that the world was discovered by Christopher Columbus, and then there was European settlements in the early part of the 17th century. And so it's just been 400 years of settling this land from the European perspective. Although one need not look at it purely from the European perspective and be sensitive to insensitive to the natives that were here and who had the land settled long before Europeans ever arrived here. However, because here in our country it ended up becoming European dominated, and history has been written from a European perspective. Therefore, to say that it's from that basis to state that and our history here is very short-lived, and though we don't have thousands of years of hostility and a bitterness toward toward others that are occupying in the land, that's reinforced from one generation to another. The closest that we can come to is the between racial relations in the United States, and particularly between blacks and whites, and there's issues that are ongoing and that are very complex. Um, that's a relative. When we look at world history, that's relatively recent. That's recent history for us when we compare ourselves to other cultures around the world that have much more ancient history. And so, so it's important here. Going back to the text, Syria is at odds with the divided kingdoms of Judah and Israel. And so Syria is going, and Syrians are going to be a despised people here in the biblical text. Furthermore, a commander of their army is even more despised. He's a Gentile, and he's also, we see, he's got an Israeli young girl as his slave. And with that, as a slave, she may have done a great many things to serve Naaman. There was no limitations on how Naaman could use this girl as his slave. So, and he was able to take her as a slave because she was part of a prize of war. So he had been victorious and took women as slaves, and she was one of them. So this Naaman character, all of this has been a whole lot of talking just to say he's going to be a despised kind of character from the Hebrew point of view. However, and so when he gets leprosy, which was this was the taboo kind of illness within this ancient world, it seemed altogether fitting. However, we know, having tracked the narrative, that the Hebrews aren't particularly virtuous themselves during this time. And what's going to happen here, this Hebrew slave girl is going to solicit, through a process, going to solicit Elisha's help in healing Naaman, the Syrian general. He's going to wash in the Jordan River. He's going to be healed of his leprosy. Jesus later on points to this as part of the precedent of the Gentile ministry, that there was many lepers, but nobody was healed in First and Second Kings except the foreign general, a disgusting character, as it were. And so Naaman is going to try to give Elisha an offering for what he has done. However, Elisha's not going to take it, but Gehazi, the servant of Elisha, is going to sneak and accept some silver, 2 pieces of silver. Well, Elisha's going to find out about it and say, this is just not good. And Gehazi's going to end up being the one who contracts the leprosy. And so we go into chapter number 6 then, and here's this: they're cutting wood, and a man loses his axe head in the water, and it's a valuable piece of property. And here's Elisha, and Elisha's there and helps it come up and float, and he performs that miracle. But more importantly, here in 2 Kings 6. It's back to Syria at war with Israel. Remember, Naaman was a Syrian, and so here Syria's an enemy with Israel. But Syria was weary of invading, and because thinking that Elisha, being a prophet, was giving intel to Israel. So they said, if we can capture Elisha, then we can stop the intelligence leak. So they're going to send their army to attack to capture Elisha. And, Elisha his servant is going to be afraid. Elisha prays, open the eyes of my servant so he could see God's army that's here to protect us. And then Elisha is going to close the eyes of the army, of the Syrian army. They're not going to be able to see who he is. He's going to say, follow me, and I'll lead you to where you want to go. And so he takes them to Samaria, where the Israelite army is. He's going to march them right into the Israelites' hands. The king of Israel wants to just annihilate this army right there, strike them down, kill them all. But Elisha says, you didn't capture them. They're not yours to kill. This is not honorable. It's dishonorable to kill them at this point outside of battle. Instead, give them food and water and then let them go back. And so here is this strange banquet of Syrians here with Israelites. And then at the very end of the chapter, here is this occasion where the people were starving. It was wartime. The food had the food had diminished, and it was to the extent to where it was turning to cannibalism at this point. Two things are coming from this. One is through Elisha. God is showing that God is still at work. And even though there's the kings are all going wrong, God is still supplying some sort of theological hero. But what's really happening here on the negative side is what's being left unsaid. That there's nothing good to write about regarding the kings. And so you have to have these prophets that are garnishing the attention. And it shows how bad things are here in the conclusion of this chapter, that it's so bad that people have resorted to cannibalism between the politics, the famine, and the economics, and the military endeavors. The people are suffering. And so our reflective question for this entire book continues: how are things going to steer this ship around? And so with that, this has been a longer video, and I appreciate your time, and I'll meet you again tomorrow for the conclusion of this week's reading.